Hello and welcome to our podcast. I am Sarah.
And I'm Elena, and we're so excited to have you here.
Since today is our very first episode, we thought about sharing with you a bit more about who we are and why we've created this podcast that we are so excited to share with you. My name is Sarah. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. I'm also an RTT therapist, and I'm an expert of the subconscious mind. I really like to dive deep into understanding better how our mind works, how our mood works, and what are our emotions. I've spent a lot of time investigating on myself and experimenting different things, different techniques to get myself to live in a more balanced and happy way. I feel it's a constant process, and that's why with Elena we've decided to share our expertise but also our very human and very vulnerable side. We strongly believe that it's super important, as the title reflects, to eradicate the myth that we are perfect human beings living perfectly happy and balanced lives. It is a challenge, but when we share it, when we spend these moments together, everything can transform and really acquire meaning.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. That's such a beautiful way to start off, I would say. So, I'm Elena, and I'm a registered dietitian. I'm a mental health coach and recently become a yogi as well. So, for the last 10 years, I've been guiding hundreds of women towards a more loving, intuitive, compassionate way of relating to our bodies, to food, to our minds. And really also been exploring so much myself on my own path of spirituality and self-discovery. And I think what Sarah is saying is so important, is that this is why we've named our podcast this way, is that I've started to really notice how within this world of well-being, it's almost gotten to the point of so much information overload that we don't know anymore where to even start. And we're kind of defying the whole purpose of it by constantly being in search of a more perfect way of being. And we're striving towards this place where if we just heal enough and learn enough and do everything perfectly enough, we will just live in this place of happiness all the time. And I think it's so helpful to have honest conversations that are about this, like how do we navigate this life? How do we navigate health and well-being, but from a place of more grounded, compassionate clarity, really about what we can do on a daily basis without really losing ourselves in this process of striving towards like the best version of yourself. Because I think that's really what I've noticed in both myself and a lot of my clients, is that we need to get to a point of more kindness and relaxation and really slowing down and really tuning in more to what is really important and what are the things we can do. So I'm really excited to dive into this together with Sarah and have these conversations about a more holistic way of living and approaching well-being.
It makes me so excited to hear you say all of that. And I would want to comment on everything you said, because the people listening with me, you will see that Elena has an amount of wisdom and just grace and peacefulness through which she conveys all her knowledge, and also she has really a quality of intuitively knowing what to say, when to say it, and the things you have said. I have really felt a shift within me since I've met you and I've been talking to you a bit more these times that we've been planning the podcast, and I could really see myself slowing down and being more conscious of all the times I was pushing through just because I felt that pressure that I was putting upon myself of being better, being perfect, doing the things as the book says or society prescribes. So I'm so excited to share this space with you and to have people that can listen to your journey and your experience, because I know that you have so much to share.
Yes, and I think, thank you first of all, and I think you're really pointing out something so relevant for our podcast, is that we live in a world that is full of these expectations, right? And they're even just through social media, but through all of these ways, we're so constantly pushed to do better, be more. Everything is always focused on more. Even if you tell somebody about, I don't know, your business success, they're like, oh, but what is next, right? And there's like always this pushing towards what is your goal, right? Even if you're just telling people about your exercise, it's like, oh, what are you working towards? Or and it's something that's causing a lot of stress. And I think it's really what we were talking about before recording as well, is we kind of lost a more natural way of looking at well-being, and really this feeling of not being good enough is at the root of so much of this, right? So Sarah, maybe you can tell a bit more about why do we call the podcast Never Good Enough?
It was a really brilliant title, if I may say so myself, in the sense that we wanted a podcast that was relatable. We love listening to podcasts. We do that all the time. And for me, I find myself sometimes scrolling through these titles that look like so glamorous and like rebuild your life, transform yourself, move to the next level. And I feel literally tired just reading the titles, and I don't want to listen because already they make me feel so inadequate and where I am, like feeling moody or not knowing how to change my mood during the day. And being a therapist, sometimes it can be hard of like having a struggle that you help people with, and then you have it yourself and you're like, I should be a pro at this, I should be flawless at this. So going back to the title, when I was reading all these super positive, amazing titles, I felt like I want to be the creator of something different, something that can be listened to in the deepest depths of despair, of discomfort, of pain. Because I have, as we all, gone through a lot of pain and literally desperation. And I think it's a moment in retrospect to be celebrated. And I would love for this podcast to dive deeper into, as you were saying, first of all, normalize the aspect that we're not these perfect creatures that are happy all the time. And that's not what we were built for, I believe. And also, what do we do when we are in that deepest depth without having to change who we are, without having to buy another course or read another self-help book? Who can we relate to and just create that space, like you did with me this morning, and I hope I did with you this morning? Just create this space to feel like you're accepted and it's okay to have a bad moment. And actually, there's a lot in that bad moment, but you don't need even to know it whilst you're going through it. If it helps, to me, for me, it helps to now know in retrospect the moments I'm feeling most stuck. That's the seed that will trigger my growth. My future growth is in that pain and in that discomfort. But first of all, my really deep desire is to create a space where we can normalize that. Yes, it's okay to feel that you're not good enough, but that doesn't mean that you are. It means that you're telling yourself that you're not good enough.
Amazing. There's so much there I want to respond to. I think it's so good to highlight this, right? That we want to normalize not feeling amazingly happy and fulfilled every day, all day long. And I think in itself, just recognizing that, talking more openly about that will create a bit of ease around it, right? Because I think so many of us feel very alone in the struggles that we go through, maybe the overthinking or anxiousness or whatever it is. And it's not very common to really talk about these things, right? And what you're really going through. And I think we always have this idea that other people somehow have their shit together more, and that even if they are struggling, they know better how to deal with it, right? And there are things to do to really help yourself, right? So we also want to dive into those things, but to first of all really recognize that the idea of constantly expecting yourself to feel good is actually part of why we're not feeling good, right? And that we want to create a space where we can talk about where that's coming from. And I therefore really like this title as well, because so much of our stress and so much of our yeah, really when we're not feeling good comes from these expectations. And I see that just a lot within myself, but also with so many of the women I talk to on a daily basis, is that whether we're talking about our bodies or food or a new wellness trend or relationships or work, that we're rushing so much. And I think it's great to kind of slow down and take a deeper look at what really is going on and how we can, yeah, we can start to gently change this without it needing to be fixed, right? I think that's such a thing we want to make sure that we're not doing here, is that we're just providing another way of how you feel inadequate or how you're still not feeling good enough, and this is yet another thing that you need to like pay attention to. And because those lists are endless, we could literally fill our whole day with breath work and ice baths and matchas and all sorts of things. Like you could literally make that your entire day and it still wouldn't fit, right? Because there's so much more you could add to that list. Yeah, so I think we want to get kind of back to the basics. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And I find that a lot with my clients. If I tell them, but you know, you're going through this depression, what you should really do is every morning at 8 o'clock, go outside, get some sun, and have a very nice walk. Okay, from a rational standpoint, probably that's the best thing that they could do. But the fact that I'm forcing a person to do something is not the cure to depression itself. The cure is always within us. If you're feeling like you should or you would want to eat in a healthier way, but there's some inner voice that doesn't literally allow you to, it's not by telling yourself that you should read another book or you should get another nutrition plan. It's about dealing with that voice because it is your voice. And sometimes we feel a lot of guilt or shame towards ourselves. And I'm really a master of making myself feel guilty for the tiniest things. And I talk also with a lot of people that tell me I reflect a lot about what people tell me. And then when they tell me something it's a bit negative, I have that sentence stuck in my brain for days, for weeks. And I think about why have they said that? What did I do to cause it? And it is a pattern that is out there, and so I think it's very important to speak about it. And going back to the situation where maybe you would want to change the way you eat in a more healthy way, it comes from you wanting to do that for yourself because you've got your back, because you're in a place where you can take care of yourself a lot. And I see that's a bit of the destination of all healing journeys, whether they're geared towards depression or anxiety or eating disorders, is to bring the person at a place where they really have a choice about what they're doing or not doing, what they're eating, what they're not eating, but they are deciding instead of saying, look, you really should do this. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, both to create the option to have a choice and also to see from which kind of place you're making the choice. So, this was actually one of the things that really led me to dive deeper into myself and really create a different approach with a lot of my clients, as I just started out like years ago with just giving people advice about nutrition, right? As it's my background, it's how I've been educated. And I just very quickly realized, I think because in parallel, I was kind of doing all these meditations and mindfulness and really diving into my own patterns, that I was seeing how, of course, people know what is healthy. Like, generally speaking, we know what
Yeah.
is good for us, right? And we know that it's good to move, and we know it's good to eat vegetables and fruit and drink water. And, there's, of course, a lot of different perspectives when it comes to nutrition, and we can definitely create an episode about that. But it's not really about not knowing what is good, right? It's how do we make those choices without it also being very forced and actually becoming a source of stress, right? And I think that's where we're kind of speaking to that space where we're trying to do our best, but we're maybe doing a little bit too much of it. And yeah, I think that's really important, and it's really speaking towards perfectionism, right? Which is kind of what our title also talks about, is this constant feeling of it not being good enough. And yeah, I'm wondering, Sarah, if you have any examples for, if people are listening and they're like, okay, yes, perfectionism, because I'm definitely a recovering perfectionist, and I know Sarah is as well, which is part of why we're doing this and want to share more about all of it. Do you have an example of like how would people recognize that they're maybe in this space as well? Because I remember myself that it took me a while to realize that this was like a driving force behind my stress and anxiety.
Absolutely. I would say this constant feeling of something not being quite right. As much as you are invested in what you're doing, you can put a lot of hours into it. You can even have positive feedback from other people, and yet deep down inside, you know that for you, that's not okay. You feel like something is missing. It could have been better. You're not giving it your all. You maybe also have a little bit of guilt associated. I would say that is one of the biggest lights, internal lights that are telling you, pay attention, because here you have an issue with perfectionism. I also like to imagine it as like a race. A race must have a finish line. But when you're a perfectionist, that finish line moves. So there's no cutting the finish line. There's no hit of adrenaline. There's no satisfaction. There's no, okay, I'm going to tell myself I've done a great job. So if you're always chasing towards something and this thing moves, so one day for you it's the promotion, but the other day it's actually having standing ovation, and then the third day it's actually getting a lot of money. So if you see that you're chasing different things but you're always chasing something, it probably means that you're a perfectionist, and there is this idea of I need to fill a void inside of me with achievement. And the last thing I will say, answering to this great question, is if you feel like you really want to fit in, you really want other people to appreciate you and love you, and you're trying to get that love and that appreciation by being brilliant, it is very often a sign that you're going to set the bar so high for yourself that you're going to become a perfectionist. So that finishing line you will never meet, because the finishing line is not getting all straight A's. It's not having that thing you're chasing, but your finishing line is getting that love and that acceptance.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because I think that was one of the big aha moments for me when it comes to this perfectionistic tendencies, is that when you're really in it, you feel that it's real, right? Like you can achieve it. Like there is a perfect place, there is a perfect you, you could have done it better and then it would have been perfect. There's this real idea that the perfection exists. While what is Sarah is pointing out so beautifully is that the whole thing about perfectionism is that it is never good enough. So you won't actually reach that point ever. And that's what's so detrimental for your mental health, right? It's like really sad to constantly be living in this place of just not feeling great about yourself because you know you could have done better. And this is also true for our bodies, right? This is like such a big topic that we'll dive into more, but it's this idea that there is a place of perfection that we might potentially reach if we do things differently. But then, of course, realizing for a lot of women who try to get there that we never do get there, and that even another plan or another superfood or whatever it is, or surgery, it's never gonna be good enough. And another thing I want to add, and I think this is just a great tip maybe for if you're feeling this way, is for me everything shifted when I started to realize, and I think I heard this from somebody but I don't remember who, that this perfectionism is really not about just liking things to be perfect, right? Which still feels like it's somewhat celebrated somehow in society. And even when you're saying I'm just such a perfectionist, it's it's not really seen as like a negative thing,
Yeah.
even though
Sorry
it
if I
has like a
Sorry
real
if I
effect.
interrupt you. It makes me think my boyfriend has a business. They make curtains, and on his business card he has written, it's a bit of a joke, but it really fits his character, chief perfectionist. And people are complimenting it. It was meant as a joke, but people are complimenting him on the title. They're like, "Oh, finally we've got a perfectionist."
Yeah, because I do think it stands for people who do want to get everything right, right? So it is, especially I can imagine if you want to hire somebody to create something, it's great if you know that somebody is like obsessed to do things the right way and have and do nothing wrong. And that really brings me to that point is that all of that really comes from this fear of not being good enough and of doing things wrong. And that really perfectionism is all about being super afraid of judgment, being shamed, feeling like you're a failure, and basically not really knowing or having learned how to deal with that kind of rejection. And in this way, we're really trying to control ourselves, our environment, in order to be safe, right? So if we just can create this perfect version of ourselves, or at least present the perfect version of ourselves to the outside world, which can feel so lonely, right? Because maybe people don't even really know the real you, and you don't feel comfortable to share your struggles, which will only like make things worse for yourself, right? And it's really sad place to be in. But all of this really comes from not having really the love and acceptance towards yourself that it's okay to be a messy human and to fuck things up and to give 60% when you're doing something, or write an email and just send it right away and not read it over like a million times. And there's so many things that we can gently start to let go of and allow ourselves to be a bit more authentic and be okay with not being perfect is such a relief. It's like one of the big things I think for both of us, right, Sarah? To if you're talking about well-being, it's these deeper layers of letting go of these driving forces that really allow us to step into like a more beautiful, relaxed, happy version of ourselves.
Beautiful. I love that. And I wanted to ask you, Aline, what would be the one tip that you would give to a person that has been listening to us and thinking, probably I'm a perfectionist. What can I do about it?
I would say start recognizing it really is the first step, always, right? Awareness around the pattern. I think we are so used to being rude to ourselves, and we have this voice inside our heads, right? And like if you're like, what voice? That is the voice. And I think it's good to start listening to what it's actually saying, because sometimes maybe if I say like, we're not very kind to ourselves very often, you might be like, "Oh, I don't think so," because
Mm,
we've so normalized this rudeness and like judgment. It's so normal. Like people even talk about it with friends and like, "Oh, I just hate my hair," and "Oh my God, yeah, this," and it's almost like a game sometimes of like who is judging themselves more. And it's just, I think, becoming aware of this voice and starting to create a cheerleader in your mind instead. Somebody with, imagine the pom-poms even, like who is just gonna be celebrating you as you already are, and kind of reminding yourself of this idea that we're talking about, that it is never gonna be enough. So letting go of that idea and really starting to recognize how it's like an unhelpful thinking pattern, we can start to shift how we're talking to ourselves, which really is like the first step, right? What
I love
about you, Sarah? Do
it.
you have
Made
any
me.
recommendations or tips?
I love your tip, and I'm just going to like chime in and say that when I give that tip sometimes to people, um, the feedback I have, and I can remember myself, a previous version of myself thinking this, is if I let go of the perfectionism, will I start to be a sloppy person? Will I start to suddenly neglect a bit my chores, my responsibilities? And how will I be perceived at that point? Like, I'm not showing up as my fullest self because I'm not pushing myself. So people are very scared to stop pushing themselves. Like, this crazy rebellion will happen and I'm just going to lie in bed and neglect all my tasks. And so I guess that my second tip that has to come after yours is give yourself that space to do an experiment. And in this experiment, you are actually not 100% sure of what the result will be. Otherwise, you're not doing the experiment. You're just replicating a formula that is already out there. So in your personal experiment, it's take away a little bit, just a little bit of that negative talk, of that voice that Alina was speaking about so beautifully. Just tune it down a little bit, because anyways, going from 100 to 0, it's impossible. So in the next days, maybe a couple times a day, notice that you've told yourself, oh, I hate my hair, or I don't like my body, or I should have done this so much better, I could have done this so much better, and try to let it go just a couple times a day and see how that shifts. And whilst you're doing that, my experience was you see that you have less judgment towards others as well. And it's a very nice mirror that happens when you look at, what am I thinking about other people? Even when I'm sitting down, maybe in the bus or in the metro, what am I thinking about other people? How am I judging them? And try to tune it down just as an experiment again for a couple of days. And you might notice that then you tune down the negativity and the judgment that you have towards yourself as well.
Yes, beautiful addition. Thank you, Sarah. And I think you're really hitting a point with this fear so many people experience. It's like, but what if I let go of this like grip I have on myself and this constant push towards like productivity, right? And like, I think it's good also, so this is a third, is to realize that this idea that you can only be motivated and push yourself from a place of judgment is very limited. There is another way, from a place of compassion, from a place of self-love, from excitement, from creativity, that you can do things. But we're just not used to it because our society is so focused on this judgmental push towards things. And like, this is the same as with taking care of our bodies, right? Like, there's the perspective of it needs to change because it's not good enough. So I'm gonna punish myself, I'm gonna exercise and eat very little. Or if you let that go, that doesn't mean you just let yourself go and you'll overeat on everything and you become this really lazy, unhealthy person, which is such a stereotype people have, which we'll talk about more later, another episode. But that there's another way to take care of yourself, right? From a place of care, from a place of love. You want to nourish your body. If you love something, you'll want to take care of it. So of course you want to exercise. Of course you want to eat nourishing foods, but also enjoy yourself, right? So there's a different way to motivate yourself to do things than just being rude.
I love that. So shifting, if I understand well, is shifting the fuel behind your motivation from I'm not good enough, I need to do this better, I need to get my shit together, I need to whip myself, to I do it because I love it, because it makes me feel good.
Yes. Yeah.
Beautiful.
I think that's such a game changer. And also really helps to kind of soothe that fear of losing control in that way. Do you have an example, Sarah, for
I
yourself?
do. You read my mind. So basically, I have met my lovely boyfriend about a year and a half ago. And when I met him, he was going to the gym almost every day. And he told me that he really liked to go to the gym because he thought, once I have a gorgeous, attractive body, I will find a girlfriend. But then he did find a girlfriend. And after we were together a couple months, we both noticed that he didn't really stop going to the gym, because there's a part of him that loves going to the gym. But the part of him that was telling him, you'll never find a girlfriend unless you go to the gym, dissolved. And so he wasn't going every day anymore. He was going probably twice, 3 times a week. And at first, his reaction was panicking and saying, oh, I'm going to lose all my muscles. I'm going to become this ugly person. You're not going to love me anymore. And I told him, even if you lose all your muscles, I'm still going to love you because I love the inside of you. And he was even more like astonished by what I was saying. And he was like, this girl actually means this. And so it took a bit of time for him to adjust from, as you were saying, fueling himself with this crazy drive of I'm gonna be a failure unless I do this, to this love that he actually has for going to the gym. And it has taken, I would say, about a year. And now he really tells me in the morning, oh my God, the thing that would make me super happy right now is to go to the gym. So I'm gonna do it. And other days he comes back, he's tired, he's like, oh, of course I'm not going to the gym. I'm going to just rest on the couch without having that guilt or that blame.
Yes, so it comes from a much healthier, more loving, more gentle place, right? Of enjoying moving and enjoying taking care of yourself.
Exactly. Elena, I would like you, if you want, to introduce our next episode. It's something that we're both super passionate about, and I know you can describe it in wonderful words.
No pressure.
No pressure. In perfect words.
Yes, exactly. So we thought it was very fitting, since we both have a big passion for food and body image. It's like such a big topic, and it's something that needs a lot of attention, I think. And it's really present in both of our work. We guide a lot of women towards a more healthy, intuitive, compassionate place of taking care of our bodies. So we really want to dive into this world of body image, of dieting, of healthy eating, of perfectionism, how it's all really interconnected, and really also dive into, of course, like how can you make small changes or change your perspective in a way that really supports your well-being without trying to constantly strive for something better, right? Kind of coming home to your own body. And I think it's an important topic. There's a lot to share about it. I'm very curious about your perspective on it, Sarah, and your personal experiences. I know you have some. And I'm also really excited to share a bit of my method or things that I talk a lot about with my clients, as it's one of the main things I help women do. And yeah, maybe share some success stories or maybe some things that people can relate to, and really to kind of explore this topic more, which I believe we're gonna be talking about lots anyway.
I'm so excited. I can't wait to record our next episode and ask you lots of questions on it. I think it's a really, really interesting topic. And unless you have anything else to say, I think that we could close this episode. We thank you, everybody that's listening. It really matters a lot to us, the fact that you're here and that we can share this space and with this time with you.
Yes, thank you all, and see you next time.